Chuck's an old friend, and I don't think I've seen you, what would be 20 years?
Yeah.
We haven't changed a lick.
Oh,
I was already blonde by then, and you already had some gray. I can't imagine why, but we won't point to any fingers. So when he invited me to be his Grand Inquisitor for the book, I had to say yes, and that's how I came to be here. Chuck bills himself appropriately as a serial entrepreneur. You co-founded several medical device and biotech startups. You hold 3 patents on geographic information technology. You've taught entrepreneurship at Binghamton University. You're also a committed environmentalist. You thought I was... Yes, environmentalist. Come on, have a little entertainment here. I'm the one who drove through the rain and the storm. Through his editorship, he transformed the Adirondack Peaks magazine for the Adirondack 46ers and produced a quarterly online newsletter for the Edward L. Rose Land Conservancy. He's also on the advisory board for the World Trails Network, Hub for the Americas, which supports field schools, and an expedition program promoting trail conservation, sustainability, and stewardship. And these are really critical roles as we move forward in our very changing climatological world. And probably when you became involved, it was passion of one type. And now it begins to morph and take on even more urgency to ensure our tomorrow. Now, his passion for the mountains is apparent through The Ghosts of Glencoe. And it was the impetus for climbing trips, both his own and guiding young people to mountain ranges in many parts of the world. So, Chuck, given your passion for the mountains, I feel like we should have a little music here. It's little wonder why they play such a key role, an integral role in your inaugural novel, along with the school set in the Adirondacks that you know very well. And I'll go back to becoming friends with Chuck. I knew this stuff. I knew the school from you telling, fictionalized, and the love of the mountains. So did you set out to write a book about bringing an audience to the Dacks, or to share a coming of age story? And it's a coming of age for both the students and the person who runs the school.
For sure. I mean, coming of age has traditionally meant the change from adolescence to adulthood. I think that's oversimplified, and I don't see any reason why one can't come of age as a 63-year-old, which Hamish McLeod does as the headmaster, and he's never too old to learn, and his 15-year-old counterpart, 9th grader, Tracy Barkham, is really never too young to teach innocently. But to answer your question about sort of the school in the mountains, yes, the school where I taught was the inspiration for the school in the Glencoe school in this book. And it's a junior boarding school, both of them in real life and in the book. And one has to ask, why would families send their children away to a school that's not for special education purposes, for 4th through 9th grade? And so that opens up opportunities for very interesting character development.
So, twofold question on that, and then I want to go to the prologue in a moment. It is a special school. It is a special education. It
No doubt.
is unique from what one would get in a public school. So how does this then appeal to a population of readers who sometimes, look, we all like to escape, but who don't have a lot of money? You know, if you're not going to a specialized school because you've got some learning issue, but you're going to learn in a different way, is this only for rich
Absolutely
kids?
not. Again, both in real life and in the fictionalized version, there is a mix of kids who are coming from the wealthiest families in the world, who've some who've never been in a kitchen before because they didn't have to be, to those who are on scholarship from inner cities. And you wouldn't know the difference in terms of what they're bringing. There's no technology that they're bringing. They can't have cell phones. So it is a special place, you're correct. So special education is probably accurate, but for different reasons. It's experiential education based upon the John Dewey precepts, who was sort of the titan of progressive education. And in the book, the two founders met as master's students at Teachers College, and John Dewey was one of their professors.
Ultimately, as we go back to, it's a coming of age for many people at many ages. And it starts, and I'm going to ask you to read a little bit from the prologue. You and I spoke, and I told you how engaged I was with the prologue, because, and it takes a while for that to become, for the audience to understand the impact of it in the book. Hamish, it's something that happens in his youth.
Correct.
And really colors everything he does, and how we take time to mature and accept our responsibilities in our lives. The things that we want to put aside and tell ourselves never happened, the lies we tell ourselves, but also the truths that we know occurred.
To be accountable for your actions.
Yeah.
So originally there was no prologue, but the story that you'll hear part of, which is told, happened in 1959, when Hamish is 20 years old, and he is passionate about climbing the hardest peaks in the Alps, and he's cutting his eye teeth in some of the hardest routes in the Scottish Highlands. So he's there for a weekend, and his partner doesn't show, and he oversleeps in the hut. And so the weekend appears to be shot. What unfolds, you'll hear a little bit about, then haunts him for the next 43 years until the events of 2002, the fall of 2002, which the rest of the book describes.
Take it away, Trev.
Okay. So picking this up partway through, I've set the scene in the prologue. Between oversleeping and a no-show climbing partner, Hamish's plans to tackle Zero Gully, which is the name of the route that he's selected, were shot. He lit his cook stove and went outside to fill a pot with water from the standpipe. The weather was ideal, sunny and crisp. I bet the ice conditions in the gully are prime, he thought, feeling sorry for himself, that it was not to be. Christ, what a waste, after all this anticipation. Hamish began to think how he could salvage the weekend when a tall young man strode up to the hut, nodding to him as he passed, and entered the hut. Hamish followed him in and set about preparing his breakfast of oatmeal and tea. The blonde newcomer was deep in conversation with the caretaker, who had stopped sweeping and leaned on his broom. "I don't think it wise to try number 5 gully yourself," the caretaker said. "It's gnarly, and you've not got a partner, have you? Do you know much about the climbs on this side of the Ben?" This is Ben Nevis, which is the highest point in the British Isles. "No, I'm not that familiar with the area, but I didn't come all this way to spend the day in a hut." "It was a sort of last-minute thing," the newcomer said, towering over the diminutive caretaker. He spoke the most proper English, with no hint of a Scottish accent. "The routes in this valley are not for the faint of heart. You got to know what you're about," the caretaker advised. "But if you think you've got the stuff, talk to the laddie over there," he said, gesturing in Hamish's direction. "He's on his own as well. Maybe you two can pair up and find a route you can handle while we still got some sun on us." The young man walked over to the table where Hamish was spooning honey into his mug of cereal and stuck out a hand. "Hi there, my name is Andy Border. Would you be interested in climbing together today?" Hamish stood up shook hands with a newcomer, taller by a good 6 inches. "Hamish McLean," he said. "Might well do so. My buddy never showed, so if you'd like to try your hand on one of the gullies on the bend, maybe we can make a day of it." Andy Border took off his pack and sat down on a bench across from Hamish. "Not familiar with the routes on the north side," he said, "but always wanted to know what the fuss was about. Hate to waste this hike all the way up here. Such a beautiful day. Can you lead routes of this quality? I can follow most anything." With my eyes closed, Hamish lied. "You're on. Do you have a route in mind?" "I do, as a matter of fact," Hamish replied. Although Andy was not as experienced as was Hamish at high-angled mixed routes of rock, snow, and ice, he was 26. He'd been climbing longer than Hamish and could be the second man on difficult climbs, as long as a rope and a skilled person above was there to support him.
I want to jump in and ask you a question.
Mm-hmm.
Humility. Humility runs through all of your lead characters, and does here. They all believe more than they are. Is that something one needs to climb, or is that a liability when one climbs?
Oh, I think to climb safely, one must appreciate the fact that your success depends on much more than just you.
And that becomes a theme in the book.
Mm-hmm.
And relying on others is a theme throughout the book.
Which is part of the hero's journey, which is one of the main things.
You have a couple of kids, 3 key, Tracy and Libby and Malcolm. How much of them are based on kids you know? How much of them are figments?
They are definitely composites, but they represent people I taught, people I climbed with. And they are interesting foils for each other. So it's important that, these are, you mentioned 3 ninth graders who don't get along very well, to say the least. And yet they are forced to have to deal with each other in very humble ways when push comes to shove.